Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the very first webinar that we've attempted using my group MeetUp, using the MeetUp platform. And that's through our group called Hydration Nation, which brings together as many people as we possibly can who feel a very deep connection with health and wellness, whether it's their own or whether they're providers who are in, like the naturopath, holistic health and well-being types of areas. And this webinar that we're putting on today is kind of like an introduction that follows the same structure as our meetups that are currently running in Neutral Bay. And so it's going to run basically exactly the same way. It's going to cover some very basic health and wellness sort of like principles, what you're looking at in terms of gut health, in terms of like mindset, dehydration, how that affects our cognitive ability, stress, anxiety, depression. And we're also going to look at water, which is one of the biggest contributing factors and one of the most underrated sort of tools that we have at our disposal that controls our health. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen and show you guys the slideshow that we use for our events. And I'm basically just going to guide you guys through it. And I'm not sure if I'll be able to see the chat box, but I'll definitely have a room there right at the very end for any questions or comments. So definitely welcome to shoot them through and I'll take a look at the end. So obviously I started my business as Water Just Ain't Water. This started quite recently, but my journey in health and wellness really started a year and a half ago when my health was at its absolute worst. I come from a very strong hospitality background. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of mindfulness about health and wellness there. And so I was very prone to obviously drinking after work for extended hours. And then just repeating the cycle, going back, sleeping a few hours, going back to work, drinking afterwards. And so my mindset really took a massive beating. I started feeling massive spouts of anxiety, depression. I lost the gratitude that I had for my job and I spiraled into huge depression and suicidal tendencies. Until I got pulled out of Sydney by my amazing sister and my dad and my sister's family, who sheltered me over the next 5 months while I did a huge mindset reset and totally reset my entire body. So I completely detoxed myself and felt that I was ready to come back to Sydney and kind of like follow that path and share all of the valuable information that I'd learned along the way and everything that I've learned since. So let's get started. So water plays a very major part in health and wellness. The picture that we're looking at right now is over 400 years old. That depicts the like elixir of life. The people were on the lookout for like the pool of life, the endless youth that was provided by this, like water was really put up like on a pedestal. It was put up as like quite a mythical type thing. It had huge restorative powers, and it's still true today. So the most important thing, especially to note, is that we can survive quite well for weeks without food. But once we start getting to the 2 or 3 day mark without adequate amounts of water, we start seeing some of our most basic functions start to fail us. That's motor functions, our ability to process food properly, and we're going to start exploring that. So what does dehydration look like? How does it begin to work? So the very air we breathe can kick off the dehydration process. We sweat when it's really hot. The sweat's used to cool our bodies. So that's the water that we're trying to retain is expelled like out of the pores of our skin. And that's also what kicks off the dehydration process. One of the biggest things, everything that we eat, everything that we drink, obviously has to be expelled at some point, and it's the urination and our bowel movements that that obviously take some of that nutritious water with it and can really kick off dehydration. One of the biggest tell signs is looking at what your urine looks like and how often you're passing urine. So obviously the lighter shades is ideally what you want to look at. The more hydrated you are, the clearer your urine is going to be. Vice versa, the darker it is, the faster you need to get very good water into your body, and lots of it. So obviously, among looking at what our urine looks like I mentioned before, some of the telltale signs of dehydration include irritability, nausea, headaches. You're going to start seeing a huge drop in energy levels, and obviously, it's going to be a lot of grumpiness associated with that. You're going to see decreased motor skills. So our brain, which is fantastically complex system, obviously relies on a lot of water for it to operate properly. So once you start seeing decreased motor skills coming through, that's a very huge telltale sign. Dry mouth is another thing as well. If you're licking your lips a lot, if you're finding it very hard to swallow, you need to get a big glass of water in you. And so once your urine is passing through, like all your kidneys, all your bladder, and needs to get itself out, it's going to be, it's going to, like really try and like retain as much as it possibly can, just like a cactus does when it rains in the desert, which is obviously very rare. The cactus will retain as much of the water as possible to try and keep itself alive. So that's really the main function of our body, and our role as the host of our body is to obviously take care of what we're putting in and how much of it. So at least the two major types of water we're looking at most importantly today is tap water and bottled water. So tap water is obviously one of the first go-to rehydration points for people. So unfortunately, in countries like America, North America, and Australia, the local municipal water treatment facilities put various types of chemicals into the water to make it safer. And I say that in quotation marks because there is a positive and a negative for the two. So the first thing that we're going to start looking at is chlorine. So the major reason that the chlorine is added to our water supply is to kill microbacteria and to try and purify the water as it passes through the entire water supply. But unfortunately, the studies that are being done on the effects of chlorine on the body include increased rates of oxidative stress, which we'll talk about soon. Another thing we're going to talk about as well is free radicals. So free radicals appear very, very often, or almost all of the time, in chlorine. And I'll also explain what that is, but they both have very adverse effects on the human body. Fluoride, which is also put in the in the water supply as well, has been, I guess, defensively added by like our governments, which is an aid to combat bacteria in tooth decay. But unfortunately, the studies that have been done by North American colleges have conclusively come to the understanding that that if they took the fluoride out of the water system, there would be zero adverse effects on tooth decay. However, fluoride has been used, to mentally stabilize people to make them more complacent. So it has huge effects neurologically to make people more docile, which was tested in the 30s and 40s in the Second World War. And what we're seeing, especially with children, is with huge amounts of fluoride that's been put in the water, fluoridosis, which is a discoloration of the teeth, and especially in combination, fluoride and chlorine, they strip away the calcium from bones, which is why we're seeing a huge early onset of osteoporosis in men and especially in women as well. And one of the last things I want to look at in tap water is LYE, lye. So that's one of the main ingredients that soap makers use, goes into the mix to make soap. The main purpose of putting lye into the water supply is to artificially balance the potential hydrogen level of the drinking water to make it safer. And we'll talk about how, acid and alkaline and how potential hydrogen works in just a moment. But that's the main point that I wanted to make, is that lye, which is put in the water supply, is to artificially balance the potential hydrogen level. But unfortunately, what we found is that lye is an arsenic, it's a poison, and that over time it's slowly killing us. So that's another thing to look at and to take into account of as well. Bottled water is I would say, much more convenient than tap water. It's more readily available when we're out of the house. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, testing has been done on bottled water, and that's by independent researchers. Unfortunately, there's no conclusive evidence of the equipment, original manufacturers putting out the amazing benefits of bottled water. However, independent testing shows how unregulated the bottled water industry is. So looking for bottles that say tap water is looking for spring water is increasingly important, because independent testing shows that more often than not, bottled water is really just bottled tap water. And unfortunately, be it as it may, the composition of the bottles that make up our bottled water contain a lot of chemicals. So unfortunately, because of the mass manufacturing process, it can take months, even years, to go from the factory to reach our homes, right at the very end of the process. Unfortunately, that means that a lot of the chemicals that are in those bottles leach into the water. So despite the fact that we might be drinking tap water, which is bad enough, that we're also drinking these chemicals that are added into the bottles as well. So one of the major things that I wanted to talk about today is going back to potential hydrogen, or pH, of all the things that we put into our bodies, all the things that we drink. And so there's a constant battle within our bodies, which is the acid versus the alkaline. So just to make that a bit bigger for everybody, so what the acid and alkaline balance really means is, so if we imagine the acid and alkaline graph goes from 0 to 14, where 0 is highly acidic, and if you can obviously use the word in the strictest term, acid, which is obviously like a melting agent, or like a very strong disinfectant slash a sterilizer. So what you're going to see is that our bodies carry a natural pH level of 7.3. And it takes a very delicate balance to maintain those levels, where adverse effects can happen on either side of the spectrum. So I would highly recommend people get their own pH testers. So I'm pretty sure you can use the same ones as you use for pool testing kits. Otherwise, I can access them for you. and get them shipped to your address, or I can go and pick them up for you. And I would definitely recommend testing your tap water, your different types of bottled waters, so that you can sort of see for yourself where on the pH level the drinks that you're drinking actually sit. At least from my own experience. So you're seeing obviously your tap water is going to be sitting at about your 6.57 pH level, and that's the lye doing its job, which is artificially balancing it there. But I would recommend looking at different types of bottled water, Mount Franklin, your Fiji water, my zones. I would definitely look at doing like your Gatorades. I would definitely, I've tested rainwater, I've tested different types of bottled water, and not surprisingly, I've also tested soda water, which tests incredibly low and highly acidic. And so you're also putting into that equation coffees, alcohols that are going to be incredibly low on the pH level, but extremely high in acid. So what that means is that that's creating a very stressful situation in your body that's going to make you sick. It's going to oxidize faster, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Whereas on the opposite side of the scale, anything above 7 pH is going to be alkaline. So that's going to do the exact opposite effect of anything in the acidic plane. So that's going to promote healthy, healthy mindset, healthy gut, like a healthy gut. It's going to increase your ability to look after your weight management. It's going to look after your ability to manage stress, depression, anxiety. And we'll talk about oxidative stress in just a moment. So what is oxidative stress? So if you can imagine, say, the Statue of Liberty, so the exposure of oxygen to the Statue of Liberty has turned it into a green color, which basically just means that the air itself is actually eating away at the metal that makes up the structure of the Statue of Liberty. And the same thing kind of happens to us. And I'll show you in just a moment where oxidative stress really comes into focus. But what oxidative stress is to us. So oxidative stress to us can, on the very first point there, be the result of free radicals found in tap water. So I'll briefly touch on free radicals because we'll go into that in just a moment. But what happens with free radicals is basically that they're scavengers of the body. So they look for a particular type of electrical charge that they carry themselves. And if they can't, then they'll scavenge the body, which becomes increasingly sort of difficult to manage. It makes you incredibly sick and can also be the precursor for cancer. So oxidative stress can be the imbalance of free radicals and antioxidants. And we all know the word antioxidants, but I don't think there's enough appreciation that goes into it. So we're going to give antioxidants their moment in the next couple of slides. Oxidative stress can manifest itself in people who carry high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. So we'll also discuss how oxidative stress can manifest itself, and I can be definitely the poster boy for it, and I'll discuss that in just a minute. And so just as we were saying before, it's the oxidative stress is naturally occurring in the air we breathe. So I know it's kind of scary to think that, especially, it probably makes sense that when we're in highly populated areas, that the very air we're breathing is just a huge mix of, like pollutants, of car exhausts, of, like of what's expelled from like air conditioners. And so that can become a very stressful sort of environment. So, but one of the biggest notes is that high levels of oxidative stress, so especially in like people that smoke, especially in people that drink a lot, especially in people who carry high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Oxidative stress carries very, very strong links to attention deficit disorder, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, vitiligo, chronic fatigue, and like I was saying before, several forms of cancer, Lafora disease, which is a neurodegenerative disease. It's also linked to Alzheimer's, autism, infection and inflammation in the body as well. And so while we're talking about the very air that we're breathing, our skin is one of the biggest sponges in our body. It absorbs everything that we we expose to the elements. So skin is very subject to pH stress. So if we're drinking a lot of coffee, if we're drinking a lot of alcohol, if we're drinking a lot of like sort of soft drinks, our skin can break out. That also includes processed foods and whatnot. I don't think that that's a surprise. And so our skin is quite reasonably balanced to where the internals of our body is as well. So it's a very close to 7. And so one of the biggest things that I really want to point out is that the chlorine that we have in our water is a huge precursor for dermatological issues that people have. It can be eczema, it can be psoriasis. And obviously, if we expose our skin to those types of conditions, our skin can react very, very aggressively. I've done a little bit of research, and one of the things that I definitely recommend is a website called Skin Charisma. And that basically looks at, especially for the females in the audience, for using different types of beauty products. So Skin Charisma is basically an online encyclopedia for the different types of skin products out there and what the manufacturers put in those products. And there are huge red flags for the different types of products that really don't make the grade. So I would definitely, if you're having any types of skin problems, rashes or any type of flaring up, I would definitely look into that. And it's also something to consider as well, because our skin is a sponge. So whatever we're putting on our skin is inevitably going to enter into our bodies, sometimes into our bloodstream. So free radicals, what we spoke about a little bit earlier, definitely shows up in chlorine. So every type of liquid carries an electrical charge. And so free radicals are positive energy or positively charged, like electrical sort of fluid that when it enters into our body, which actually happens to be negatively charged, free radicals basically try to obviously look for another type of pair. They're basically trying to mate inside of our bodies. It's like cohesive bonding. It's all about bonding. And so unfortunately, because of our bodies that are negatively charged, the free radicals just start scouring our bodies and basically just start destroying it from the inside. It snatches energy from our bodies just to satisfy and keep themselves alive. And so through testing, we've just found that free radicals are the precursors for cancer, and they make us incredibly sick. And one of the best ways to combat free radicals is through oxidation reduction. So we spoke about how oxidative stress happens in our body. Where oxidation reduction comes into it, that's where we start learning about antioxidants. So antioxidant reduction and antioxidants go hand in hand. So oxidation reduction is loosely defined on how fast or slow we age and get sick, just like the Statue of Liberty. Oxidation carries a numerical number which can be measured by an oxidation reduction potential meter or an ORP MeetUp. And so the best way to measure how fast or slow we're going to age or how often we get sick is basically measured by what we're putting into our bodies. And so obviously, if you're going to, one of the best ways is obviously to start looking at your bottled waters, your tap waters, your sports drinks, your sodas, which by and large, most of us are putting into our bodies on a regular / daily basis. But obviously through independent testing, the numbers are basically laid out for us. And so what you're going to see is that anything that carries a positive oxidation value is going to make us more sick and age us faster. Anything with a negative ORP value is going to slow down that process and make us make us feel a hell of a lot better. See how oranges are in there. Vitamin C. We all know that from a very young age that vitamin C is very, very good for us. That's exactly why. Green tea. Everybody knows that green tea is very good for us. And that's the absolute reason why. Green tea slows down the oxidation process. It's very good for us. So I definitely recommend finding an ORP meter. I'm in the process of doing that myself. Unfortunately, they're not as cheap as I'd like them to be. Now, one of the biggest things that we're finding is one of the major reason why we are being told to drink so much water, or why we, especially when we drink water, why we feel that jiggly sound when we're drinking water, because it falls under the untreated water plane, where the molecules of the water are too large to enter the cells of our bodies. So if you can imagine trying to throw a tennis ball through a fence, the size of the tennis ball is too large to easily pass through the fence, aka cell membranes. So that's exactly what you're saying, is because the water is untreated, the molecules are too large, that not all of the water is being absorbed into the body, and it's not nourishing our body as it is supposed to be. However, treated water, much like ionized water, which basically means water that passes through electrolysis, restructures the water so that the size of the molecules pass through the cell membranes far better. So you're hydrating faster, and the beautiful hydrogen that makes up the structure of the water is getting to the body and not turning into oxygen and making it oxidative. So we're fully hydrated, and it's nourishing our bodies. And so one of the biggest centers of all of the decision making and everything that makes up almost who we are is done in the brain. And so that's all your day-to-day decision making. That's where the stress is held and starts manifesting itself elsewhere. Just like anxiety, mindset, migraines, and headaches. So that falls under your hydration and dehydration. And also makes up part of our ability to achieve a deep night's sleep. And so that's definitely something to really take seriously. Our gut is the central nervous system to everything, just like our brain. They go hand in hand. If one is not in balance, the other will send very strong signals to you to rectify that ASAP. So our gut requires a delicate balance of naturally occurring acids and alkaline as well. So there already are naturally occurring acids that are obviously there to break down the food that we've eaten for the day, and obviously turns that into the poo that we do, on a regular basis. But unfortunately, two acids don't make a positive. So if we've already got those naturally occurring acids and we're eating processed foods, that that will definitely throw the gut off and is the precursor for IBS. But one of the biggest things, and something that I've discovered very recently, is something that we see almost on a daily basis, but we'll never even know that it's there unless you do your own research. Sorry, and it's something called carrageenan, and is a prime example of something that's hidden in our food and we wouldn't even know it's there. So carrageenan exists in pretty much dairy, mostly dairy. So in your cheeses, your yogurts, your ice creams, and carrageenan basically works as a stabilizer or like a preservative. So basically keeps it fresher for longer. And especially in ice cream, carrageenan is used to stop ice crystals forming on the ice cream. But it's a huge precursor for creating ulcers and also for huge inflammation in the gut. So if you're a huge dairy eater, that's definitely something to think about and something to research as well. And so I recently discovered an app called Think Dirty. So that should be available on iOS and Android. And that you can enter any type of food you can possibly think of, or at least any type of food product you can possibly think of, that's been peer reviewed by dozens or hundreds of even thousands of people through the application, who have done their own independent research and testing, and will either pass something that's good for you or will red flag something and will definitely have an explanation why. But going back to throwing off the delicate balance of, our gut health, it's a huge precursor for IBS, mood, stress, our mood, our stress, anxiety, and it all comes from poor eating and drinking habits. And so our gut is a very complex system. As everything passes, all of our major organs have a different function in breaking down that type of food, and every organ responds differently. So, and especially as far as weight management goes, our gut health is incredibly important, because if we're throwing that balance off, it'll depend on the acid storage and the fat cell storage. So obviously you'll find that if you're trying to, manage your weight, look after your weight, that looking at the pH level of what we're drinking, the different types of food that we're eating, is looking at where and how we store acid and fat. Another big thing is looking at calcium robbery. So obviously going back to water, looking at your fluoride and your chlorine, that will rob the calcium from your body just to try and sustain itself. That could, spur early onset osteoporosis in both men and women. And obviously, really taking note of the sort of pH type drinks and food that we're eating, will also stabilize cholesterol as well. And all of this has to be balanced with, exercise, structuring food properly. One of the best ways to be able to manage food is to at least have three types of food per day. That's your fiber, is healthy fat, and also meats and such as well, that recharge your batteries on totally different levels, and obviously managed with exercise, movement during the day, you're going to see huge changes happening there. So I am opening the floor to questions and answers. At this point, unfortunately, we don't have any attendees, but I will be uploading this to as many platforms as I possibly can. And once you've seen it, you are more than welcome to throw in any questions that you'd like, and I'll try to answer as many as I possibly can. So this concludes the meeting for the day. Thank you so much for watching. If you're catching the replay, wishing you all the love, luck, and happiness in the world, and hope to speak to as many of you as I possibly can on a much deeper level, and hopefully be able to clarify things if you have any questions. So in the meantime, I'm going to wish you all the best, and I'm going to sign off. So much love to you all, and hope to chat to you soon. Bye for now.